AD Shaco, the terror of low elo, is now being played in high elo, but as a support, able to stealth past enemies, find a carry, and burst them before they realise what's happening. The video that started this channel was an inting AP Shaco support, but this pick is completely different. He's an assassin that auto-attacks people to death, but the most special thing is a new rune interaction he uses with his clone that turns it into a 1v9 killing machine, giving it a huge amount of permanent attack speed. But of course, this player is still just as inting as the last one. This is I'm So Clonely, also known as Lick My Shiv, but mainly known as Pinkward, a challenger Shaco main, and recently he's been playing a ton of AD Shaco support, with a new level 1 mid gank to get a surprise early lead, some great new clone tricks, and of course a ton of AD assassinations even on support. If you're a squishy champion, there is no counterplay to this pick. But first, this video is sponsored by Final Fantasy XIV Online, one of the biggest MMOs with over 1.6 million daily players. And the best thing is, you can play it completely for free up to level 60 with no restrictions on game time, letting you play hundreds of hours of the full game to see if you like it before you have to spend anything, with absolutely no pay-to-win microtransactions. My favourite part is the character customization, with a crazy amount of options from the face to the body and even tail shape for this class. It's crazy. But the great thing is, after level 10 you can change your character's class if you want to, and you can even play all of the different jobs on just one character, so there's never a requirement to make a new one if you want to try something new. And there is now a new expansion named Final Fantasy Endwalker, so now's a great time to get started. Travel through the early levels and experience all the years of content and deep stories the developers have added. If you want a whole new world to explore full of quests, jobs, and unique stories, then sign up for free at my link in the description. Now back to Pinkward, our Shaco, and his story with the champion actually started before League of Legends was released, as Pinkward used to play a game called Heroes of Newerth, and in that game there was a champion named Scout, who was shockingly similar to Shaco. He had a permanent invis on his Q, coming out of stealth his next 3 auto attacks for maximum attack speed, and he even had a W he could place down to CC enemies. Riot really did a copy and paste with this one, and Pinkward loved Scout, so when he came to League in Season 2, he found Shaco and it was all he needed. Back then he was an AP Shaco specialist, and at the time you could stack boxes right on top of each other, so his favourite play was filling a bush full of 5 boxes, so that any enemy who walked close enough would just immediately die. After an infamous game against BoxBox, the Riven main and streamer, Pinkward's Illuminati Shaco combo was born, and the legend began, hitting Challenger in Season 6 for the first time using Shaco, and ever since being in high elo, with his all-time peak being 1061 LP Challenger in Season 10. But none of this explains why anyone would pick AD Shaco support. Let's start off with where this pick came from, then explain the ridiculous OP interaction the clone has with Hail of Blades when he gets level 6. As with a surprisingly high amount of off-meta supports, the origin seems to have been Beryl, the world champion Korean support. It's quite likely someone else played it first, but as soon as Beryl picked it up, it spread to the west, and this is where it was picked up by Vigar V2, the Cloud9 coach. Pinkward then talked to him about it, and together they invented a level 1 cheese play to get a huge advantage at the start of the game. He does something completely unexpected, immediately ganking mid with Q. Starting here, he likes to wait to try and spot the enemies in case they invade. Then he walks through mid, staying out of vision, avoiding the most common vision spots which are in the river by going into this bush. Once the wave arrives and the enemy walks up to get CS, Shaco Qs all the way over this wall completely unseen, appearing behind the enemy mid, stabbing them in the back for 145 damage crit, into 3 autos from Hail of Blades, exhausting and igniting to guarantee the kill. This is so unexpected, especially in high elo, as supports usually have to leash, or at least be ready to go bot lane at level 1 to manage the wave. And on top of that, Shaco players never start Q, so no enemy is ever prepared for it. It's a great play, especially if your mid laner is an assassin. If you can get a kill for them at level 1, you just won their lane, and they can keep going for kills to dominate it. And Shaco can just go back later on to get more kills for himself. But he doesn't always get the kill, and he doesn't always use summoner spells either. His most common play is just queuing in to chunk the enemy mid, getting gold from his support item, and also trying to force them to flash away. Even just ganking to take away their health bar is really useful, as it makes your mid laner's game easier. He then has plenty of time to get back to bot lane, using his Q again to jump over this wall to make sure he doesn't miss any of the XP. If you time it right, you can even Q to get the XP and then get into the bush without being seen. The enemies just saw you in mid lane ganking, so if you can stay in fog of war, they won't know where you are. They won't expect you to even be in the lane. So when your Q cooldown comes back up, it gives you a very surprising engage. At level 1, Pinkward says this is probably your strongest point in the whole game. With your Q stealth, health, full combat summoners, and Hail of Blades, he can jump onto an AD carry and burst them enough to get a kill right away. That is the power of the backstab and the auto attack damage. AD Shaco in lane is all about this Hail of Blades and Q damage. In most matchups he's playing aggressive. Whenever his Hail of Blades is off cooldown, he jumps in, trying to get a kill whether he dies or not. There's no real escape once he goes in. He does have Nimbus Cloak, which makes this slightly less risky, letting him exhaust them and sprint off if he really needs to. Even if he's just chunking the enemy AD carry and walking out, it's a win for Shaco, as it gets them off the wave and thus reduces their gold income. This whole laning phase is a lot different to AP Shaco, which is much more passive and playing around boxes, but there's no reason AD Shaco can't use these same boxes as well to protect his AD carry, and still completely counter any hook support. As soon as a Blitzcrank or a Thresh hooks, he puts a box down and plays behind it, making sure he never gets hooked. I mentioned he ints quite a lot, and you can see why. He's pretty happy to trade his own life for a kill, because his life isn't as valuable as the enemy AD carries, as they need to be CSing and collecting the XP, whereas he's happy to just get the kill. And also because when Shaco respawns, he uses the revive home guards to go mid lane and re-ganks the person he ganked at level 1. No matter what, this will be a pretty good gank, but it'll be especially good if you got their summoners at level 1. One of Pinkward's specialties in lane is how he places his boxes down, and he's well known for placing them right next to each other, so when an enemy runs into one of them, just as they think they're safe, there's a second one waiting for them, and this will ruin any champion's engage. But earlier I mentioned a crazy rune interaction that causes Shaco clone to do a stupid amount of damage, so let's talk about that. Pinkward says the origin of this discovery was a psychopathic player on EU West named Unbreakable Bond. It's a crazy coincidence because this guy was in one of Tyler 1's master games in EU West, and Pinkward saw a single fight where Shaco Support used his clone and his AD to basically 4v5 DPS a team fight, carrying even after his AD carry died.
I'm going to pull down this Shaco's pants, and I'm going to suck.
Now this player is even more inty than Pinkward, always fighting super early on in lane to make sure he can die at some point and then roam top lane, an even more surprising gank. But level 6 is where his clone trick begins. This is a special way to use Hail of Blades to transfer your attack speed to the clone and keep it there for the whole duration it's alive. With Hail of Blades up, if you auto attack an enemy once, you activate the rune, and this gives you 110% bonus attack speed, so it practically doubles it just for these next 3 attacks. However, if you press your ultimate while you have this rune active, your clone will copy the stats you have at that exact time. This means they get the Hail of Blades attack speed, but it doesn't run out after only 3 auto attacks. It stays there for the lifetime of the clone. This means that at level 6 you have a fast auto attacking buddy to DPS any enemy of your choice, and as the game goes on, building full AD, the clone will gain all of that damage. And also if you do the trick again, it will have this permanent double attack speed, meaning that if you keep it auto attacking, it can do double your damage. You can see how insane this clone can be in fights, especially when enemies are used to AP Shaco and don't expect it to do any auto attack damage at all. Usually against Shaco Support, one of the best things you can do is not kill his clone, as it's the explosion that does the main damage. But against AD Shaco, the DPS is much higher when it's alive, so ignoring it isn't going to help. At level 6 he also buys a Sheen, so he often doesn't even need the clone damage. Instead, staying in the fog of war in bot lane, with enemies still thinking he's probably roaming again, he waits for the perfect moment where the enemy duo finally split up. Shaco jumps the wall, flanking the AD carry with a box, and autoing them from behind to DPS them down. The great thing about AD Shaco compared to AP is that you're not sitting back and waiting for the enemies to walk into your boxes. AD Shaco Support is super active, making plays, jumping into lanes, and looking for kills himself. So although this pick is much higher risk, it's also much higher reward, as you can actively force enemies out of position even when they think they're playing safe. Even just a support jumping onto them and auto-attacking them can lead to a catch. First item, Pinkward can buy Essence Reaver if he's getting fed and has the gold for it. This gives him really high damage immediately, or he can go Umbral Glaive if he's lacking gold. It's still good for the damage and great for denying enemy vision. Mid-game, since he's an assassin, his goal is to snowball the game. But of course Pinkward has added another tool to help with this, often buying EVERFROST in this AD build. He doesn't really buy it for the AP of the item, he buys it more for the active it gives to lock the enemy down when he ganks them. Since most of his damage is AD, his focus is on getting as many auto attacks off as possible. The best way to do this is to EVERFROST someone and then put a box down down on top of them at the same time. If you do this correctly, it can activate right away, and this just lets you stay on top of them for even longer, using your auto attack damage to get the kill. And this CC also buys him time to do the clone trick to transfer his attack damage, making sure he can DPS anyone. The other option without EVERFROST is to keep going full AD, buying ECLIPSE next, and maxing out on AD damage so you and your clone can dominate fights. Teamfights are the best part of this pick, because this is where Shaco can literally just stealth into a fight, walk towards the enemy AD carry with no one seeing him, and then auto them until they die. This is really hard to predict in a hectic teamfight, and even high elo players will die to it before they realize what's going on. Shaco isn't really an important target because of his low income and his role, so while enemies are all focused on his carries, Shaco can slip in unnoticed and completely change the fight, then able to reposition and play at a distance, going in again to pick apart the enemy team, instead of just joining teamfights like a normal DPS threat. He just wants to ruin the fight for the enemy carry. With Ignite, Exhaust and some auto attacks, they should already be out of the fight, and thanks to the clone trick, he can even match their damage to shut them down. With the EVERFROST hybrid version, he plays more like the baiting Shaco we've seen in the past, using this to waste the enemy's time and put them in a bad position. The EVERFROST build is especially good if your team already has the DPS to win the game, but maybe you lack CC. And of course, it wouldn't be Shaco support without a little bit more inting. Pinkward is always happy to trade his life for any important enemy target to guarantee his team will have an advantage in the fight. Any fed, squishy champion on the enemy team is a viable target for you to jump on and make them die in exchange for you. Late game, regardless of build, Pinkward is going to end up with a ton of cooldown reduction, so at any time he's able to have 7 boxes placed down on the map, constantly placing them whenever the cooldown is up. These just give him and teammates opportunities for enemies to walk into them, and those can set up kills. To rate this pick, we need to compare it to its main competition, AP Shaco Support. Compared to AP, the AD build is much more active. One of the issues of AP is that you kind of have to sit back and wait for the enemies to do something, and then if they buy a sweeper you become quite useless. AD Shaco doesn't have this problem, as right from level 1 he's doing something that can help win the game, and even in lane his 2v2 fights are quite good, whereas AP Shaco needs some time to scale. You become a real DPS carry even in the support role, and you still have the utility and surprise that Shaco always has. I like this pick a lot. One huge issue is Melio, who he bans every game. Any disengaged champion like Karma or Janna is a perfect counter to AD Shaco, as any time he goes in with Q he's going to be stopped. But on the plus side, AD Shaco destroys tank supports, as he can ignore their engage and simply just jump on their AD carry instead. For his full AD Shaco build, Pinkward starts Scythe, into Essence Reaver or Umbral Glaive depending on his income, going Eclipse for the highest damage mythic, or EVERFROST for better ganks and playmaking if your team has enough damage already. After that, if you want more damage you can go Blade, Lord Dominic's or even Infinity Edge for maximum DPS. Or if you're playing more supportive you can still go Zhonya's to bait enemies into Wardstone for the extra wards and the bonus stats. The rune page is vital, having the Hail of Blades, also Sudden Impact for higher Q damage, Zombie Ward for vision control, and especially Nimbus Cloak as well, for more mobility to make your engages safer. It was a pleasure to get to interview Pinkward for this, and he has a lot of AD Shaco gameplays on his YouTube channel if you want to see those. And right now he's streaming right on the edge of Challenger on his Twitch, link to both are in the description. And please also check out Final Fantasy XIV Online, our sponsor, at the link below. Thanks so much for watching.